The Blocktalk podcast started because of my passion for the property management industry. I wanted to start a conversation and add some value within the industry with a diverse range of people and professionals who can add something extra. As we start out, my aim is that the podcast offers some useful insight into a variety of views, opinions, thoughts, and foresights from our guests, who include business leaders and industry experts. If you enjoy the podcast and want to find out any other information, head on over to brianwelsh.co.uk. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Blocktalk podcast with me, Brian Welsh. Today we have the pleasure of talking to Malcolm Perryman, Chief Commercial Officer at the Property Institute, to talk to us about the outcome of this year's Wellbeing and Resilience Survey Report 2024. Now, I think we've spoken about this for the last couple of years, actually. Malcolm oversees all TPI's existing business income streams and seeks out new opportunities in order to grow and develop the business. Yeah, this is Malcolm's third time on the podcast. It's good to have him back. Is it morning or afternoon? I think it's afternoon. Afternoon, Malcolm. How are you? You well?
Yep, I'm very well. Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to all your listeners. Thank you very much for having me back and for letting us talk about the Wellbeing Survey again. It's something that we hold very dear.
Yep. And we've had some good chats about this over the years, actually. So should we start with just an overview of the results?
Yeah, sure. So, first off, thanks very much to everybody who participated in the survey. So we had over 500 respondents again this year, which is fantastic. And I can promise the people that send in those responses that we do read every single one of them. And we very much appreciate everything that people send through. I guess the long and the short of the survey is that there's still a sizable gap between the well-being of our respondents and the well-being of the general public. And we measure that by comparing, the same questions that we ask of our respondents to the questions that the Office for National Statistics ask in the National Measures of Wellbeing Survey. The gap did close this year. Somewhat, but that's only because the nation had pretty significant declines in their well-being. So that can't really be described as being good for everybody.
As a positive,
Everyone's well-being declined last year. It's just that our survey respondents' well-being declined slightly less than the well-being of the nation overall. So I'm not going to be waving any flags or jumping up and down about that one. So whilst some of the big changes, there was a big decrease in the number of people who were working 100% from home. But equally, there's no evidence that everyone's going back to the office 5 days a week. There was no change in that number whatsoever. And effectively, the vast majority of people are now working hybrid. And that pretty much means 2 to 3 days at home a week seems to be the pattern that it's settling onto. People are working, if you're in property management, you work in a 46-hour week, which is hardcore. It's a lot of hours. And that's partially driven by the fact that organisations have got vacancy rates of about 20%. That's in the estimation of the people responding to the survey. Abuse from residents, from leaseholders, from directors is still the scourge of the sector, and completely unacceptable. And opinions about staying in the sector are mixed at best. They did improve somewhat year on year, but you're only looking at really 50% of people saying I'm absolutely certain I'm going to be in the sector in 3 years' time. One of the really encouraging things is that the vast majority, it's like 72% of people, said that they were taking wellbeing into their own hands. And what does that mean? It means they're doing physical things like exercise, or they're changing what they're eating, they're making sure that they're getting enough sleep, they're reducing the amount they're drinking, they're quitting smoking. They're doing things to enforce their work-life balance, like just saying, I don't do emails after 6 o'clock at night. I no longer do
Yeah.
anything at the weekends. Um, People are doing mental health things, mindfulness, yoga, meditation. And in a number of cases, I've sought professional help. So I'm going for therapy. I've got a counsellor. And, I think whereas a few years ago, people would be reluctant to disclose that, it seems something that people are perfectly happy to talk about these days. So those were the overall kind of readings that we had out of the survey this year.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think certainly in the group of people I associate with, certainly the 10, 15 years ago, I think nobody would ever have told you they were seeing a counsellor or a therapist or whatever they called it. But I think now, I think it's people are far more open about these sort of things, which is a good
Yeah,
thing as well. Yeah, but it can skew results as well, because if no one's talking about it and then they start talking about it, everyone thinks that obviously more people are going, but actually just more people are talking about it. But
yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
I
I used
get
to work in the construction trade press like years and years
yeah,
ago, and
yeah,
one of the editorial team came out and said that they were seeing a therapist, and it was a big deal. It was a really big deal
yeah,
because
yeah,
it's just a different world. It was a macho environment, but
yeah.
they found it
Mm.
enormously useful.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, so was there anything that stood out for you from this year?
Yes, so this year I found out something that the Office for National Statistics do, which is a category of well-being called high happiness.
Mm,
And that's people who answer the happiness question with a score of 7, 8, 9, or 10 out of 10.
okay,
And it just struck me it would be a good idea to identify how many people we had that fitted in that category and to try and identify what the differences were between them and the average respondents. And there were notable differences. It was definitely a worthwhile exercise, and it gives a lot of indicators as to how we can improve the situation that we've got at the moment. Um, so looking at the questions we ask about support from all areas of life, so friends, family, colleagues, employer, boss, stakeholders that people work with in their job, um, the levels of support that the high happiness people expected was very similar. It wasn't dissimilar at all to the average.
okay,
But in every single case, the support that they received was higher uh,
okay,
than the average, and also it exceeded their expectation. So their
okay,
expectations of support are being exceeded, whereas the average is under that. Most people don't
okay,
get the support that they're expecting, with the exception of friends and family. Every area of their working life, on average, people feel under supported. Um, the high happiness people were much more likely to be offered flexible working arrangements by their employer.
okay,
Um, and their perception of their workload was slightly lower. I mean, it was 6 out of 10 rather than 7 out of 10. So not a
okay,
huge
okay,
difference, but a
yeah,
little bit lower. But they were still working a 45-hour week. So, by no stretch of the imagination are high happiness people happy because it's somehow an easy ride. They've got pressure. They've got long working hours. Um, they were significantly more likely to believe that their employer took genuine action on well-being than the average as
okay,
well. And that question has kind of become a default question for, does my employer care?
yeah, yeah,
And it was a lot higher for people in the high happiness category. Probably the craziest statistic this year was that there were a few physical assaults on staff that were logged,
shoot,
but all of the people in the high happiness group, or sorry, all of the people who'd been physically assaulted were also high happiness people. Um, and
wow,
that really got us thinking, and we've talked to people about, do you identify with the high happiness persona? Can you relate to it? And a lot of people kind of see it as a decision. I just decided that I was going to have a positive outlook. I just decided that this stuff wasn't
mm,
going to let me down. Um, That's not in the survey. That's kind of like anecdotal things that we've done for
Sure,
presentation
sure.
of the results, and talking to groups and things like that as a result. Um, so when you look at high happiness in the round, you've
Yep.
got people who believe they're receiving better support. They've got
Yep.
flexible arrangements. Their workload pressure feels manageable. They feel like they've got an employer who cares. Um, they were slightly more likely to have lower personal financial pressure as well.
Okay.
And the cost of living crisis has affected everybody, but
Yeah.
the high happiness people felt that their personal finances were not particularly pressured. Um, and when you add all those things together, it's nothing profound. It's not rocket science. All those things kind of make sense that you're likely to
Yeah.
feel happier if those are your circumstances. But when you add them up, the result is that only 10% of that high happiness group see themselves as leaving property management in the next 3 years. So it actually
Okay.
makes a really big difference to the sector's ability to retain staff, to retain talent
Yeah.
in the sector.
Yeah. That's really interesting, actually. So we do a thing within CPL, and I did it in my other business that I sold last year as well, which is a thing called Friday Pulse. I don't know if you've come across it, or if we've probably spoken about it before, actually. And basically, you just measure the level of happiness, rate it 1 to 5 on a weekly basis, and really, I guess what you're looking for is not necessarily, we don't measure happiness. We measure engagement in the survey every week. Um, but what we do measure is if it's low, then it can be low. Shit happens in life, right? People
Hmm.
can have a bad week, but it's about the resilience and how it comes back up that really you're looking to measure. And actually, it's something that we talk about every week as well. Every week we look at it, we talk about it, we look at possibly what the reasons were the previous week that these things happened. So I think personally, I think it's a great thing to look at on a
Hmm.
regular basis. Yeah,
Yeah, 100%. I mean, we since merging with Armour and the Property Institute coming together, we do a pulse survey with our own staff on a
yeah,
regular basis, and it is really important to get a big and representative turnout for those surveys. And I
yeah,
think it's just
yeah.
something that good businesses do these days.
Hmm. Okay, interesting. Okay, so I guess that moves us on to any major changes since the last report.
So in terms of the core data, the core questions, it's very consistent over the
Okay.
years that we've run the survey. Um, that this is a sector that is under pressure and is
Yeah.
really feeling the strain. We've got the long working hours, high levels of workload pressure, people leaving the sector, meaning that the same portfolio then has to be divided between a smaller number
Yeah.
of people. And I think the sector has worked out that this is a downward spiral. And I can see lots of organisations that are taking steps to counter that and to really prioritise their staff. And that's a necessary step because trying to get people, the war for talent, is the number one issue in business globally. Um, Looking at the high happiness respondents was something that we wanted to do, to
Yeah.
try and identify, what the differences were. Um, and another thing that we did this year as well is say, well, hey, what do you enjoy about property management? What are the elements of the job that you love? And we got some really good verbatim feedback. We word clouded it. We did some analysis on it, and we came up with three core things really that we think people value. So first of all, respondents found their interactions with colleagues and customers and other stakeholders to be rewarding.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of relationships that build that people find of value. Um, there's a great variety of challenges to the job. It's a bit of a cliche, but it's a job for problem solvers. No 2 days are ever the same, and you're never going to get bored being a property manager.
Yeah.
And actually, because of the nature of the job, um, the challenges are rewarding and they're meaningful when you achieve them, and they give people a sense of accomplishment because they have an actual impact on the built environment and on people's lives.
Yeah.
So people kind of felt that tangibly, that what they did was important, and that it was a rewarding and challenging role. And finally, where people were receiving flexibility from their employer, they really valued it very, very highly.
Okay.
So that's something that is so important. It goes a long way with staff and keeping them if they feel that they're being treated flexibly, and it's not all about presenteeism.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Understood. Understood. So one of the things we discussed last year was kind of attitudes to well-being. So do you think that attitudes are shifting more towards well-being now from the survey results?
So I guess it's a global trend. So one of my colleagues on our wellbeing working group circulated a report from the insurance broker Aon, a global wellbeing report. And effectively what this report says is the big blue chips, the big corporate organizations and their investors have identified that a good well-being performance is the way that you retain talent and you attract talent into your organization, and that the war for talent is the number one global business priority at the moment.
Okay.
And that they've basically now got the data that says for every point of improvement on well-being performance, you're going to get an improvement in the profit for your organization, for your staff retention, for your customer satisfaction. And there's a direct relationship to it. So again, it's the data from big organizations and global reporting that takes the lead, and other people will then follow, because these big companies have put the research into it and they've sussed out what the dynamic is. And yes, well-being does make a difference to profits and shareholder returns and things like that. Of course, there are contrary voices. I've got no doubt about that. I do hear them, and there will be many secret skeptics out there as well, no doubt, who just believe it's a load of fluff and nonsense, and it's a fad that will disappear. So I recall Investors in People. It's probably something that you recall was really, really big in the 1990s.
Yeah.
And the organizations, people were the most important asset for organizations. And the global financial crisis hit, and all of that went out of the window, and all of a sudden, people who investors in companies, invested in people companies were losing their jobs. And it turned out that people weren't the most important thing at the organization. The financial viability of the organization was the most important thing of the organization. So I wouldn't deny that well-being's future is kind of tied to market forces,
Right.
and that the boot is on the foot of the candidate for jobs at the moment, because there's loads of vacancies and there's not enough talent. And having been through like 3 recessions in my career now, you never know really when that switch is going to happen. Suddenly the taps go off, and it's a different market. And what well-being would look like, in an adverse market, who knows, but certainly at the moment, it's a tool that people use in order to attract and retain top talent. I don't mean to
Okay.
sound cynical about it. That's my view, and looking at the impact that investors and big companies see it having.
Okay. So does the survey point towards anything in the industry of attitudes within the industry moving more towards well-being?
Yes, I mean, more people see it being addressed by their organization. Definitely. Uh, it's a case of it being done well.
Yeah,
And that's where we added the word genuine to the, does your company provide genuine action on well-being?
yeah,
When we asked it without the word genuine, people were like, well, they do some stuff, but
yeah,
actually it's window dressing, and
yeah.
it's not genuine. So
Tick box exercises. Yeah,
yeah, that's it.
yeah.
So the number of people responding positively to that question did drop off.
Okay.
I don't doubt the intentions are good of the people
Yeah.
that are not believed as being genuine. I think that it's just poorly executed, in some ways. And people need support in how to set up well-being programs in their organization.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're right. It's one of those things, isn't it? If you want to do it, you can't just give it to someone as their job. You've got to
Mm.
actually have someone or get an external agency to do it because, A, expertise and B, time, because, if it's not part of the day job, it's not going to happen. Okay. Interesting. It was interesting, the global report as well, actually. Okay. So what training does TPI offer, or are there courses or resources you could recommend?
Yeah, sure. So if you were to Google TPI well-being or just search for well-being on our website, you would
Yeah.
find over 100 links now to
Okay.
various resources we've either created or we point to on other people's websites. Um, there's always content on well-being in each of our publications. So the TPI
Okay.
update, monthly industry focus, and AQD, we ensure there's always at least one piece of content about well-being every time, and there's always a conference session. So if you go to one of our regionals or the annual seminar, or you go to our main conference, um, there's always well-being on the agenda and somebody talking about it. Um, we're not a massive organisation, and there's no point
Mm-hmm.
in reinventing the wheel where someone else has done something really well.
Yeah.
So one of the big players in this market is Susie Lamplugh Trust. They've
Yeah.
got some excellent resources, and we frequently signpost to their website. De-escalation training, difficult conversations, things like
Yeah.
that. Lone working, they are the experts at that, and they've got some very good resources. And then there's organisations like the British Retail Consortium,
Yeah.
Hospitality UK. There are problems with all customer facing roles.
Yeah.
And it's a trend since lockdown, COVID, that people's behaviour has deteriorated.
Yeah.
They're less tolerant, they're less patient, and all people with customer facing roles are facing abuse and difficulty. And our sector is a reflection on that. It's not unique. There are unique characteristics to it. But it is happening in lots of other sectors in the UK economy. So the British Retail Consortium have done some work with government. Government backed their campaign for shop staff. So I think it's like 12% of people who work in a shop have got punched in the face, in the last 5 years or something like that. It's
Wow.
awful. Um, so there's some really good content in other places that we will signpost. We're consulting with our company members at the moment on
Okay.
introducing a well-being standard to our consumer charter and standard, which is the requirement that we have for our company members.
Okay.
This would be on a voluntary basis initially. And there's an open consultation at the moment on our website. If company members are listening and want to participate in that, then they can do. And that sets out what our requirements are for firms as far as wellbeing is concerned. And in each case where we have a standard, we support those with guidance notes. And there is a set of guidance notes that's being worked on for achieving the wellbeing standard. We were talking a little time ago about execution of well-being policies and practices within an organization and how they can sometimes go wrong. So the guidance note is designed to help with that. So it takes you through step by step what you need to have in place. And it emphasizes the need for the holistic approach. And I think this is where the accusations of tokenism and box ticking go wrong. And there are 5 things that the working group have identified that they think need to happen. So health and wellness at work is the first one. Employee voice. So we were talking about surveys earlier. That's an essential part of it. Leadership, the fact that it has to come top down in order for the sincerity of it to permeate through management and into all employees. Personal growth is important as well, that people feel that they're valued and that they're developing in their role. And then finally, supportive culture. So things like no blame culture, and the fact that people feel that their organisation has got their back, I guess. And those 5 things handily form an acronym, what are they called? Acronyms called HELPS.
Yes.
So that's in the guidance notes, and that will be available to company members within the next few months, I guess. It's being worked on at the moment. So training wise, we do have a course called Developing Resilience. People can see that on our website, and can submit a form to let us know that they're interested in us running that course for them as well.
Okay. That's really good. I mean, that's a bold step to go and do all of that guidance and everything like that. And I think that's where a lot of people, it's getting started. It's knowing what to do. Because, and I mean, at the end of the day, it sometimes comes down to pounds, shillings, and pence, doesn't it? I mean, at the end of the day, if you want to bring someone in to do this, it's going to cost money. Okay. And depending on the size of the business, that's just an overhead, right? Because people don't really see the fact that, okay, if you don't do it and someone leaves, then you've got extra costs recruiting them, or, talent attrition and all of this sort of stuff. But it's an integral part to retaining people, and attracting people as well. So actually giving them a starting point where they can build from is a very good idea. Yeah.
So I mean, from my experience, budgets are never written with the expectation that you're going to have staff turnover.
Yeah.
They start out and you've got salaries for the year that think everyone's going to be there in 12 months time, and nothing's going to change. And it's one of those things where people kind of just bury their heads in the sand about the inevitability of it. But it does happen to every organization, and it's a hell of a lot of work when you're having to replace people, and it causes pressure on other colleagues. But it is going to happen, and firms need to accept that and to prepare for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Malcolm, that's been absolutely fabulous to have you on again. Thank you very much for your time. I will see you at the PMAS conference, I hope.
Yes, looking forward to it
in Glasgow. But good to have you on again. Thank you.
Thank you. And just so that your listeners know, we are going to be running the survey again. It's always run in February, so look out for communications for the survey. And please do participate. It makes a lot of difference, and there's some really interesting and actionable insight that we get from you. So thanks to all those respondents once again.
Thanks for that.
Cheers. See you later.
Thank you.